biggest challenge to me in terms of getting more African Americans in higher ed is a question of belief in oneself and a system that believes in its students. I feel that somehow kids are being taught not based upon who they are, but based upon a stereotype about them. So if people will look at a young African American male, they may say, oh, this young man should be more prepped for the state Penn, more so than Penn State. So we have to change that persona, change that idea that African-American youth and men in particular are not intelligent, because we are. The first thing you will have to do is, one, turn off the television. Because there's such negative media out there that you will start to believe, as they say, believe the hype. You have to look at your education and figure out, where does your voice, where does your face appear in that educational process, which means you have to look at a more of an alternative and African-centered type of an education, which on the most part you cannot get in the school. You have to get it from your family and other community resources and members. To answer your question, the media is playing a more of a negative role than a positive role. If you look at the media historically, if we start with the news, the news will look at an African-American suspect more so than a white suspect in terms of how it's being viewed. And I'll give you an example. If there's a white suspect, they will say, this young man from a great family, he's a great, child, blah, blah, blah. And he's 15 years old, so he's a child. African-American, he's 15, but now they'll say this African-American man, and he'll be tried as a man, and therefore there's the image of a youth being criminalized. So if you look at it from that perspective, the news is one way. If you look at history books, if you read the history books, their vision of slavery, or who were African Americans before they became Americans. What was going on in Africa? Now, it was Africans in the jungles waiting to be saved by the Europeans? No, great civilizations, great things were going on in Africa before the Columbus period. So when kids understand their foundation, understand their legacy, I think then they'll do better in the classroom. But if they think that you're from a legacy of slavery, and slavery is projected and portrayed as being a group of lazy people not doing much, then there's a question of self-esteem that's not a positive one. Okay, my take on the situation of people saying, should we look at our legacy or should we now forget about it and move on? To kind of answer that question, if you do not have a foundation, you will not have a house. And I think the youth of today have to know their legacy to understand where they are today. If we do a comparison, if we look at our Jewish brothers and sisters, they will always say, they will always teach their youth never to forget. Never forget. So you will, no matter what venue you're in, there will be a discussion about the Holocaust and the horrors of it. But when it comes to talking about the horrors of enslavement, if we talk about the horrors of enslavement, people say, well, you should forget about it. And I think that once you start to forget about your past, then there's a question about your future. And a lot of young people today, that's where they are, that they don't know their past. And I think that they feel a certain sense of comfort in their ignorance. But ultimately, it will be to their detriment in terms of how they see themselves, how they raise their children, and in terms of how we would be 2 or 3 generations from now if we do not talk about our triumphs and our struggles. Okay, to create that foundation, yes, we have to go back. We have to go back to slavery. We have to go back prior to slavery. Again, it's who were the Africans before they came here? And if you take a lot of courses today in college, they will start off with slavery. The courses will not say, okay, what happened before slavery? So I think that it's like a tree. You cannot have a tree grow unless there are roots to that tree. And you have to know the realities of your past to understand where you're going in the future. Okay, the role of the family in the success or lack of success in African Americans today is very vital. I think that the family is going through a transition just like all the other families in today's society. But historically, the African American family has been the foundation. If it wasn't for the African American family, we would not be here today. I think we would have perished a long time ago. So the family plays an important role. However, what's been going on is that if you go go back to, let's say, the Moynihan Report back in the 1960s, it seemed like they were trying to model the African family to the European family, the European model. The European model is that you have a mother, father, and 2 children. The African model and the black model here in the United States is that you're looking at the family, but you look at the family including the grandmothers, the grandfathers, the aunts, the uncles. You know, today's adage is that it takes a village to raise a child, and that village was what we call the African family. Now, as we try to divert away from that and try to go more towards the European model, that's where the conflict comes in. So if someone goes to jail, well, they say, well, was your father in the home? The answer may be no. But what about the uncle? What about the grandfather? There's someone there that's going to give them the things that they need. Right now, we're going through a generation gap between the old and the young, and that's what's part of the problem also, is that the youth are thinking that they need to look at someone outside the family for leadership and for love. So we need to make sure that our young people get back with the elders, and I think with that, things will be a lot stronger for our youth in this situation. I feel that the community definitely has to put itself back in the forefront of one's education and socialization. I think that families have to take back the control of the education of our youth in the black community. I think that historically the education system was designed to enhance whatever's being taught at home. And now we tend to put the education system first and taking the mother, the father, and significant others out of that process. I think that we have to do things that's going to enhance our culture. Okay, I'm going to look at other cultures and compare. If you notice, if you're Jewish or Hebrew, there are Hebrew schools that the kids go to on Saturdays. If you are Chinese or Asian and you lived in New York City Friday nights or Saturday mornings, you'll be going to Asian schools. So I feel that, and the reason why they do that is that the educational system that we have is adequate, but it's not enough to inculcate one's culture and one's traditions. So I think that what we're looking for here for African Americans, that we're going to have to look at a Saturday school. Here at Suffolk County Community College, we've been, for the last 12 weeks, we've put together a cultural competency class for students and their children to kind of give them an idea as to the role of how their culture plays in the enhancement of their education. So I think it has to be a community effort. It has to be a family effort of taking control. And if you look at today's education system, its genesis comes out of the education of basically white men. So even in terms of how women are being educated today, it's of question. You know, why is it you have smart girls, but then as they go through college, you know, they disappear. So we have to look at things from the perspective of what's strong based upon not only ethnicity and culture, but also in terms of gender and sex. Yeah, I would say the role of Hollywood in terms of it's both powerful and negative in terms of its role in the growth of development of all of us as human beings. And yes, I think that their foundation, a lot of the movies are stereotypical. I think they feel that stereotypes for them, for Hollywood, the Hollywood mogul, is for them to sell more tickets. I'll give you an example. You look at an actor, Denzel Washington. Done great roles, great movies. You know, the Great Debaters, X in terms of the life of Malcolm X. But then he gets the Academy Award for Training Day. What role did he play? He played this mean, stereotypical African-American rogue cop, and that was acceptable. And people say, hey, that's great acting. But yet, what he did in The Great Debaters, which I think everyone could grow from, and from X, everyone can grow from, he got nothing. So the role of Hollywood, it plays a very important role, and too bad it's becoming more part of the problem rather than the solution. And the problem is coming up with negative stereotypes about African Americans. And then what's so terrible about it is that as others take on this, you know, believe the hype, as they say, that African Americans themselves will also believe the hype, that what they see in Hollywood is part of real life, and we have to get away from those images. Movies that are out there that are doing the opposite, they don't sell. The movies out there that are doing the opposite, they're not getting the playtime that people really need to see. I think that today, in particular, young African American youth have to see more of their heroes and sheroes on the screens, and we're not getting that. Okay, the 5 tips that I could give to a parent or a significant other who's raising an African American child would be, the tips that I would give is one of health. And the first one, which means that making sure during the course of pregnancy and development that the mother's eating properly and getting proper rest. Making sure there's less stress, less arguing in the household. So I would say to get rid of the stress. 2, look at diet. You know, making sure that the diet that the mother's eating is helping in the development of the child. Now, once the child is born, I think even sometimes naming. You know, how should we name a child? Because they say that a name is more than just a label, but it's actually a prediction of how that child is going to live. So if you provide your child with a culturally related name that you could say to this child every day, let's say you name your son Shaka, and say Shaka means that son you'll fight for the rights of others. You know, and the son understands that it's his role and his destiny to fight for the rights of others. Now you're looking at things that are very good. In the area of education, you're looking to teach your child that he or she has this African genius within them. And that means that if you think about mathematics, if you think about sciences, if you think about the things that philosophy, that a lot of these things did not just come from the school system, but it comes from their past and their legacy. So you're looking at a proper education, seeing themselves in the educational system. There's a process in psychology that we call faith control. That children tend to do their best when they see people who look like them in positions of leadership and power. So, so you have to find the heroes and sheroes for our kids to see in the classroom, outside the classroom, and in the community. We need to look at, again, going back to images. So what do you have in your home? Do you have a bunch, you need pictures of people who look like your kids, and they could say, okay, when I grow up, I want to be like that person. Thirdly is to not put obstacles. And what I mean by that is sometimes there's a concept called post-traumatic slave syndrome, that a lot of times parents will do certain things to hold their children back, and it becomes from part of slavery how they want to save their child or protect their child. So they will not say to their child, I want you to go up and be a doctor. I think it'll be safer for you if you decide to go up and be a mechanic or something to that effect. So we have to overcome the change that we have as a result of slavery to basically empower and free our children. How can we overcome the post-traumatic slave syndrome? And before I answer that question, I'm going to give you a scenario that I got from a woman by the name of Dr. Joy Leary. She had a situation of a black mother and a white mother. Both their sons played Little League Baseball. And the black mother says to the white mother, Johnny's doing really well. He's great, he's hitting well, he's running well. And the mother says, well, not only is Johnny a great athlete, he's the president of his class. He's volunteering his time to do this, he's part of honors courses, and he's doing great. Then the white mother says to the black mother, and Malik is not doing that bad. And the black mother says, well, Malik, you know, I don't know, yesterday I had to get on his case because it seemed like he's just not doing the right thing. And I think that, you know, I don't understand why he's like that. Now, it doesn't mean much now, but if we go back to 1839, and we're on a plantation in the South, and the mother is with her son, and the slave master comes up to her and says, wow, your son is looking really strong there. And the mother's response at that time is, yeah, but you know what? He's so damn dumb. He's dumb as a doornail. He can't even do wrong right. He's just not a good person. Now the question is, why would the black mother say that? In 1839, she would say because she did not want the master to sell her son. So she would demean the son's character and image in the master's eyes. So now that is going from one generation to the next to the next. So to the point where you get the baseball scenario, you get that. So what I'm saying is that there's some of the things that we do via intergenerational that we would have to stop. You know, how we discipline our kids, how we tend to knock them down more so than build them up because we think that's how it's supposed to be. And we have to find ways to deal with that. Because if you think about it, at the end of slavery, there was never a healing process that we as a nation went through. So without that healing, the things that were happening back in 1839 will continue to exist today. The images that African American youth need to be exposed to more would be positive images. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by a positive image. In one of my classes, I passed around a picture of a young man looking in the mirror. And the young man had a towel around his neck because he wanted to look like Superman. The image that he was looking in the mirror wasn't an image that looked like him. It was an image of someone else, the image of a European. And I used to say to my students, what's wrong with that picture? And the students would say, well, this young black boy, he doesn't see himself as in a position of power. If he's seeing power, he's looking at it as a white person and not a person that looks like him. So we have to put images in our homes and in our schools so the kids will know that, hey, there are positive things going on. And if it's something positive and something positive, powerful, I should say, something positive and powerful, it doesn't have to be someone else. It should be someone who looks like them. Okay, you as an African-American parent, how can you prepare your African-American child with positive imagery? Or as a young African-American person, how can you prepare yourself to put yourself in a better light in today's world? Firstly, you have to revert back to your past in terms of what was going on in Africa prior to I call it the Columbus scenario of the 1492, whatever. Research has shown that in terms of science, in terms of medicine, in terms of government, I'll give you an example of that would be the University of Sankore in Timbuktu. Okay, that had over 600 professors that was teaching those types of subjects. So in other words, the people who look like you invented mathematics. People who look like you come up, with great architectural monuments. So in other words, we tend to think in the educational system that everything came out of Europe. But how about this? Some of these things came out of Africa and was taught to Europeans. So if you say to your child, listen, the person who invented algebra look like you. The person who built the Sphinx and the pyramids in Egypt look like you. The person who saw certain things up in the sky in terms of stars look like you in terms of astronomy. So you will find that you will see that there were images out there that we don't know about that have made it possible for us to be here today. Or if you look at the things that look around you, the person who invented the light, we say was Thomas Edison, but there was a guy by the name of Lewis Latimer, a person who played a very important role in the invention of the light bulb. He's the one who perfected the filament that gave Thomas Edison the ability to finalize the construction of the light bulb. There are certain situations that if we go beyond what we see in the textbook today and come out of these little, I call it boxes of ignorance, and come out of that, you will see that there are many things that we have done that we're going to continue to do to make sure that we exist and thrive. I would say that African Americans, in terms of parents, extended family, significant others, should get away from the stereotypes that's about us and look at the realities about us. If you think about the number of Africans who left the shores of Africa and never made it here to the United States, over 90 million, people left Africa and never made it to the shores of the Americas. That means South America, Central America, and North America. So we are the products of those who survived that horrific trip, which we call the transatlantic slave trade. We survived it, and we've continued to thrive here in the United States and around the world. But what's helping us to survive is true knowledge of self, so the knowledge of what it means to be African, the knowledge of what it means to be African American, and the importance behind it, and the responsibility that we as African Americans have to each other will continue us to rise and do great things. Okay. You know, I would say a lot of times African Americans will say, "But I've never been to Africa, and right now I'm an American, I'm black," and I would say that is true. But also, if you look at all of your other contemporaries, if you ask them who are they or what they are, they will tell you their continent or nation of origin. If you meet an Italian, he will say, "I'm Italian," and he'll tell you he or she's American second. If you meet someone who's Irish, they will say, "Yes, I'm Irish." They'll tell you they're American second. If you meet someone who's Latino, they will tell you they're Colombian, they're Cuban, they're Mexican, and then they'll tell you they're American second. So, and because people are making sure that they have a great connection to their roots. If you have a great connection to your roots, it will make you a more bona fide American. So, as an African American, and you say and you don't have ties to Africa, then the question is, how strong of an American are you going to be?